Okay.
Did you see my shared screen?
Not now.
Okay.
So we have 84 people, Glory.
Okay.
So, well, welcome everyone, and thanks a lot for joining us in this presentation. I would like to introduce Dr. Glory Ovie. She's currently an assistant professor in the Faculty of Education at the King's University, Edmonton in Alberta, Canada. She holds a Ph.D. in educational research from the University of Calgary with a specialization in leadership. Her background and interests are in crisis leadership competencies, mental health and wellness, crisis response and management in post-secondary and K-12 institutions. She teaches pre-service teachers in areas of health and wellness and educational administration. She has 22 plus years of experience working in the field of education from K-12 to post-secondary. She has an undergraduate degree with a major in education and a minor in economics and a master's degree in multidisciplinary studies with a focus on leadership. Her research works have been accepted and presented in conferences, and she has published articles in various Canadian journals. I would also like to share that I met Glory when I was a PhD student at the University of Calgary. I've been lucky enough to publish with her. We have published two articles and one book chapter. I feel fortunate. And we met as we were both international students, and Glory was originally from Nigeria. Now she's settled in Canada, and I'm pretty sure that you're gonna enjoy her presentation, not only because of the topic, which is something we need, but also because of her expertise. So I also wanna thank Glory for accepting the invitation and for being here with us, sharing all this knowledge and expertise with us. Thank you. Proceed, we're all ears now.
Thank you, Lina. That's an introduction. It's nice to meet everyone. That's how we say it here, because we are all meeting online, and so it's nice to meet everyone. Though I can't see everyone's faces, I see I see Christina's face and Valerie's face. So thank you for putting on your screens, putting on your videos. Lina, thank you so much. Thank you, Leslie. I hope I pronounced your name well, for putting on your video. I understand that because of the bandwidth of the internet, it's a bit difficult, for you to put on your video. So I completely understand. If your videos don't come on, it's fine, it's good. We can interact via the chat function. So if you have questions or comments or, something that while the discussion is going on, the conversation is going on, you say, oh, this, this resonates with me, feel free to use the chat function. That's a good option for us. So I was just talking with Lina that here in Canada, we don't have, well, let me not say we do not have, but with COVID, we've had issues with bandwidth as well. We have so many people going online, schooling is done online. So we've had issues with bandwidth here. Lina, thank you so much for inviting me to this conference. It's nice to be able to have a conference on the other side of the world and not have to travel. So I really appreciate that. So thank you. But I do hope to travel to Costa Rica once COVID is done with all the issues and problems with it. I'm looking forward to coming over there. Like Lina said, we met at the University of Calgary here in Canada. I'm originally from Nigeria. I've enjoyed working with Lina, publishing with her, talking about our experiences as international students, looking at how we were able to assimilate, and I use that assimilate with quotes, and also create a sense of community and a sense of belonging in a country that originally is not ours, but we've had the opportunity and the privilege to live in, and I have the opportunity and privilege to work in right now. I'm going to share my screen now so you can see my slides. I will be looking at, I have two screens. Actually, I have three different screens right here because it makes it easier for me to work. So when you see me flip my eyes to my left, it probably be your right. It's because I'm looking at my other screen. I have my notes on the other screen. So it's not as if I'm not looking at you or paying attention. I'm just looking at my notes on the other screen. So I'm going to share my slides. The topic is it's a topic that is very dear to me and close to my heart. Crisis response and self-care. It's dear to me. I believe it's important that when we are going through a crisis, we take care of ourselves. If we do not pay attention to ourselves, to our wholeness, and give it that holistic care, then we will begin to suffer a crisis, a personal crisis, be it health-wise, be it physical, be it emotional, be it whatever facet of it. So it's important that during a crisis, self-care is built into a crisis response. Can you all see my screen?
Yeah, but not the presenter mode.
Yes,
So
yes, no.
Okay.
Yes, I haven't changed it to presenter mode. I just wanted to be sure that you could at least see the slides. So I'm going into presenter mode now. So our topic today is self-care and crisis response during COVID-19. And I'm specifically talking about COVID-19 because that's what we are all experiencing right now. Someone said that we are all, we are not on the same boat, but we are all on the same sea. But our boats are different because we are experiencing different things as a result of COVID-19 pandemic. We may all be experiencing the pandemic, but in different ways. And so I've decided to focus on the pandemic, on COVID-19, because every country and every individual is handling it differently. And I'm glad to be here to be able to present this during your academic week. So our conversations today's conversation, we will be, I will do it. Lina has done a terrific job of doing the introduction. When she was doing that, I was wondering, okay, is this me or is this someone else? So thank you so much, Lina. So I will just briefly do a personal introduction. Then the goals for today's brief time would be, we'll try to explore the relationship between self-care and crisis response. We'll also look at the benefits of self-care and see if we can develop a self-care plan. And my hope is to speak for about 45 minutes. And we'll do an activity at the end of the session for maybe 5 minutes or 10 minutes and take questions, because I know that we have an hour to be together. So this is me feeling hip with myself when I took this picture. I actually took this picture last year, to celebrate the fact that I have graduated, and though we couldn't have a physical in-person graduation. So that's me feeling, oh, finally I'm done. I can sleep, eat, relax, do whatever I want to do at my own time and pace. But no, I have not been able to do anything at my own time and pace. Neither am I sleeping, eating, nor relaxing. It's just, I told someone, it's just exchanging one type of stress for a different type of stress. That's just it. So that's me. My PhD is from the University of Calgary here in Canada. And like Lina has talked about my interests already. I'm a mom to two sons. My oldest is 24, he's turning 25 next month. So I am closer to being a grandma. And I keep telling my kids, I say, please just hold on just yet. I'm not ready to be a grandma. And my youngest is 23 years. So they both live and work in Canada. They've lived here for quite a number of years now. They are more Canadian than I am. So we have several discussions around what it means to be a Canadian, what it means to be an immigrant in the Canadian society, and how do you assimilate and adjust to a society that is completely different from yours, and in terms of the culture, the food, and the people. So my two sons, they live in a different city. We don't live in the same city. So I get to see them just twice in a year when I'm on vacation, but we talk as much as almost every day. So let's go into our our workshop for today. And I will start off with the definition of what a crisis is, and gradually walk through crisis management, crisis response, and walk into self-care and the connection between self-care and crisis response, and look at some characteristics and walk through that till we get to the end of the presentation. So what is a crisis? I've put up a definition here that a crisis is an unexpected event, or it could actually be a sequence of events. And when I talk about a sequence of events, it's not the usual routine, oh, we do not have enough bandwidth, or no, we have run out of teachers or pencils or whatever. It is not the routine everyday type of emergencies that we face. A crisis is usually overwhelming in speed. It happens so fast. It's often not something that is expected by the institution or the organization. So it's out of the ordinary. And when a crisis happens, it comes with a very high degree of uncertainty. And as we humans who are on the receiving end, or the victims on the receiving end of that crisis, it leads us to having some sense of disorientation. You are trying to make sense of what's happening, why this is happening. You are having that sense of it's a loss of control. You can no longer control the situation. And it leads to very strong emotional, disturbance on an individual level, on a community level, on an organizational level. So when a crisis happens, so many things are going on. The organization is trying to manage the crisis, reduce as much havoc as possible, while on the personal level, we are really trying to make sense of why is this happening to us? What have we done to deserve it? Or how can we manage the situation? How can we reduce the loss of lives? So in the terms of COVID-19 pandemic, we can see that it's caused so much uncertainty worldwide. It's not even localized, it's worldwide. And so many countries are suffering the after effects of COVID-19 pandemic. Now, usually when a crisis happens, two things happen simultaneously. One is the fact that the crisis presents threats, loss of lives, property, finances. At the same time, while that is going on, it also presents opportunities for change. Making changes. How can we restructure our organization? How can I restructure my life? So I'm moving between your personal life and the organizational life. How can I restructure my personal life? Or how can this organization be restructured? So a crisis presents two things simultaneously, threats and opportunities for change. So we talk about
okay. Sorry, there's a mic on. Let me just turn it off. I can find it, sorry. Yeah.
No worries.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, in our present day, we are faced with so many types of crises. We've had so many types of natural crises taking place: hurricanes, fires, tornadoes, so many types of crises now that is happening much more than it used to happen many years ago. The frequency, it's the frequency that has increased. We have had all those crises, but the frequency has increased. We talk about mental health crisis and COVID. With COVID, what's happening and what we are seeing is that we are seeing the negative effects of COVID in relation to mental health. Mental health of students, mental health of faculty, mental health of the society as a whole. In Canada here, one of the after effects of COVID has been, and it's been on the news here, of people as early as noon, people are already drunk. And it's not because drinking is their lifestyle, it's not because they are alcoholics, but it's the fact that they are so socially isolated, especially for people who live alone, who do not have community. And living alone creates that isolation, and it leads to people to drinking much more than they've ever drunk because they are trying to numb the effect of not being connected to other people. And so we've been at home for months now. I have been working from home for the past year, a year plus now. So, and I live alone. So I'm one of those people who feel the social isolation. My kids live in a different city. It's a 7-hour drive to where they are. It's so I have to really plan that. Now here it's, Canada is a place that community is not as strong as I want to say, as you would have in Costa Rica or in my country of origin in Nigeria, which have very strong communities. If I was living in Nigeria and living alone, I can assure you that on a daily basis, I would have not less than 10 people coming to my place every day. We have a strong sense of community. So the after effects of COVID on mental health is still being studied. It's the rate on it, it's quite high. And then another after effect of COVID has been the fact that we've had universities shutting down, students going online, studying online, not being familiar with the online environment. How do you use the technology? What type of technology are you going to use to start with? Then how do you use the technology? The students are stressing and saying, especially for first-year students on campus who have never been to university, they say, we can't connect with other students. We are not able to make friends. We are all living in isolation. It's lonely, it's quiet, it's, so many things coming out of that. And faculty has to learn to teach online. And same questions for faculty, the use of the technology. How do we manage that? Who goes online? Who does not go online? Do we use the hybrid method? Do we not use hybrid method? So many questions have come out of this. Now, another after effect of COVID has been, creating student engagement in the online environment. How do you create student engagement? How do you get students to be engaged? How do you know that a student is engaged when the screen is what you're seeing is the black box right in front of you, because we have lots of that here. How do you know that the student is actually engaged and the student is not off doing something else? Then we also have care. Schools were shut down and went online. So parents who would, have kids go off to work where they can do their work. Now you have no childcare. Students are working online. Parents are studying online. And so you have what we call Zoom bombing. I've had classes where students, my students are in front of me, their son or their daughter or their dog or their cat, so many distractions happening in the online environment. Now, these are the after effects of the present day crisis, especially the COVID-19 crisis that we are facing. Now, I've talked quite a lot about COVID-19 and the crisis. Some characteristics of a crisis that we experience is that it grows in magnitude quickly, the frequency, and also the complexity. So COVID it started in one country and within a few months has gone across all over the world. Some countries have suffered the effect much more than some countries. So the effect has been magnitude, it has been complex, it has been how do leaders respond to this crisis, and how can we reduce the effect on the population? It's been disruptive. Our lives, our learning, our teaching, our working, it's been intense. I've had several people who have had COVID, and I'm thankful to God that they came out on the other end and they are fine. Some have not been lucky. So it's been traumatic. It's been emotionally impacting on our sense of normality and our way of life. I gave a similar workshop last year at the University of Calgary, and there were so many questions. People were really suffering trauma. There were pregnant women who said, we are so fearful, we can't go out to the stores, we can't go shopping, we can't go anywhere. We are stuck inside because they do not know the effect of COVID on their kids, on their babies, unborn babies. Now we have vaccines. There are so many conspiracies and theories around the vaccines. Will the vaccines work? Or so many theories around the vaccines. And right now, we still do not know the after effects of the vaccines on us. I have taken my vaccine. So there's a lot of negative long-term effects At the same time, there have been positive long-term effects. We can teach online. We can have conferences online. We do not have to travel all over the world as we used to for meetings. I do not have to leave my home office and drive to my office, which is 30 minutes away for a meeting. The meeting can be had online. So there's been quite a number of restructuring that has come from COVID. So these are some characteristics of a crisis, the way it impacts our lives. Now, when we'll move from that to crisis response. It's the action that we take to effectively contain and resolve a crisis. So countries are taking action. The vaccine is out. We have been encouraged to take the vaccine. We have been, it also includes the ability to be able to protect life and property, reestablish some control, and minimize the effects of the crisis. In minimizing and reestablishing control, we've had countries shut down their borders. We've had universities moving to the online environment. We've had different types of ways online to be able to connect online, some virtual dinners, virtual conversations, virtual dates. So we've had to restructure our lives to minimize the effects of the crisis, and that's crisis response. I wouldn't go into detail into crisis response and management because that's not what today's topic is. But I just wanted us to have an understanding that in a crisis situation, there are different ways that we can respond to that crisis. And in responding to crisis, one of the ways, now going into our personal lives as individuals that we can respond to a crisis, is taking care of ourselves. This is where self-care is important. Then when you respond to a crisis, I've done my research when I looked at crisis, self-care, mental health, crisis management. One of the things that really came out of my research was the fact that we had people responding to crisis on institutional levels, but not taking care of themselves on a personal levels. And that has after effects. So when we're responding to a crisis, it's important to include as part of the crisis management policy, procedures, manuals, and processes, self-care. If we do not take care of ourselves, then what happens is that we suffer a breakdown. Years from now, we suffer post-traumatic stress. Leaders have been constantly in the eye trying to mitigate against this crisis. As individuals, we are trying to mitigate against this crisis and how it has impacted us emotionally, physically, mentally. We are trying to mitigate against the impact. And in mitigating against the impacts of the crisis, we have to take care of ourselves. I really cannot emphasize that enough, because self-care gets to be, it gets relegated to the background. You are thinking of, if you're someone who has a family, you're thinking of, which we all have families, you're thinking of your immediate family. How can I protect my immediate family? We often are not thinking of ourselves in relation to protecting our families. We're often not thinking of ourselves in relation to protecting our properties. I was watching a TV show a few days ago, and there was a fire, and the lady's parents, because her parents' place was getting burnt down, her parents were ready to jump back into the fire even after they had been rescued. They were ready to jump back into the fire because they were trying to protect their property that they've spent the property one has been their livelihood. So at times we forget that we need to be alive. We need to take care of ourselves so we can provide that support for others. Now, let's move into crisis self-care. Why then do we need to? Why is self-care important during a crisis? Now, one of the reasons is because when you're responding to crisis, it has a way of absorbing all of our attention and time and resources. And this can be incredibly draining, both physically and emotionally. You are constantly on that edge. We've been constantly on that edge for over a year now, constantly. thinking about, do I use a mask? Do I not use a mask? Should I be in touch with a person? Should I not be in touch with a person? How close should I be to the next person? How close should I not be to the next person? So we have been in that state of that, giving a constant attention to this crisis, and it's draining us both physically, emotionally, and psychologically. Now, there are emotional triggers that may activate depression, anxiety, fear, mental health concerns, sadness, post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of the crisis. And so you think about the fact that people are getting depressed. There are people who are depressed as a result of this crisis. There are people who are suffering higher levels of anxiety, who are afraid to here in where I am, they've started talking about that next month we will no longer be using face masks. And there's an uproar among certain groups of people who say, no, we need to continue to use our face masks. We do not know if this is over, if there will be numbers of COVID cases will increase. So there is so much fear. I've talked about mental health. There is so much stress happening now. Crisis also leaves deep emotional scars for those who have lost loved ones. They are going through high levels of grief. It's a process. I've actually had three people who had died recently, and they're still trying to figure out if it was connected to COVID or not. So there are deep emotional scars as a result of this pandemic. And like I said, unfortunately, self-care is one of the first things that gets ignored, and it's not a priority during the crisis response process. But it should be. My argument has always been that self-care should be a priority. If you are drowning, you cannot save the other drowning person. So you need to save yourself to be able to save the drowning person. So we are all experiencing this crisis in different ways. And so it's important that we take care of ourselves. Now, I have two participants' responses here. And this is just the theory behind my research. I had spoken to a few participants when I did my research. And one of the participants, said that it's okay to seek help after a crisis. We do not always have to be stoic. We do not always have to say, oh, I am strong. This is not affecting me. It is important that we seek help because there might be residual impacts or post-traumatic impacts after a crisis has taken place that happened months after that crisis has happened. And so as an individual, this person was advocating that we look for those signs in ourselves. If we are having trouble sleeping, trouble eating, what are those signs for you as an individual as indicators that you are suffering stress or post-traumatic stress or the impact of the crisis? Another participant had said that it's so important to force the conversations around creating that sense of realization that, that COVID happened, the impact has been here for the past few months does not mean that the impact ends once everyone gets a vaccine. That there are still impacts a year, 2 years that will be happening. And how we deal with those impacts going forward is important. So this person says here that, when a crisis hits, one of the first things we do is go into the protect mode. We are busy helping others. We are busy supporting others. We are busy being there for the other person. And we do not deal with the stress, the post-traumatic stress or the impact of that crisis. And months later, years later, when something happens, it triggers that crisis. Let me give an example from my personal life. Years ago, because Nigeria has a lot of insecurities. So years ago, there was a riot and a demonstration. Well, it wasn't a demonstration. It was actually I would want to call it a genocide. There were Muslims killing of Christians in the area where I lived. This is actually one of the things that led to me conducting this research. And I, as a Christian, lived in a Muslim community. And out of the blue, on a Friday, they just decided that it was time to eliminate all the Christians. So they came at us with daggers, with machetes, with different kinds of weapons. And so the fear, first, you're afraid for your life. My kids. So just trying to figure out a way to get my family out of that situation. We escaped that situation with barely the clothes on our back, just able to make it alive. Now, fast forward years later. Of course, I did not get treated for post-traumatic stress, neither did my kids, because we don't even know what that is. We don't even, coming from Nigeria, we don't even know what mental health crisis is. Fast forward years later, I moved to Canada, I live here. I have an acute fear of being in a crowd. If I happen to find myself in an environment that there are so many people, it triggers me. And so I have to consciously always tell myself, this city, this country is a lot safer than where I'm coming from, because it plays out. Another situation that happened was that my house was burgled by robbers who came into our place with guns and all that. And so here I have that, every time I go to bed, I check my front door 5 times to ensure that it is locked. That is a post-traumatic stress. That's my post-traumatic, those are my symptoms that have come out of things that happened to me many years ago. And because I didn't take care of myself, I didn't talk to a psychologist, nor a psychiatrist, nor go for counseling to be able to walk through those emotions, it rears up itself from time to time, though I'm living in a country that seems to be safe. So it's so important that we take care of ourselves. Now, what then is self-care? I've talked about it so many times. What then is self-care? It is the engagement in thoughts and feelings and behaviors that maintain and promote our physical, emotional, social, and spiritual well-being. And self-care is, when I talk about maintaining self-care and promoting that, it's a variance. You have your physical, you have your emotional, you have the social, and you have your spiritual well-being. All these aspects need to be taken care of it. The dimensions as to how you take care of that depends on you as an individual. You know what works for you. So it's the engagement in the thoughts, the feelings, the behaviors, the activities, the things that help maintain and promote your overall well-being. Self-care is equally important for your physical health, your mental health, your spiritual, your lifestyle. And it requires, like I said, I have the word there, active, because it is not passive. Self-care is not passive. It has to be active. It has to be intentional. You have to be engaging in whatever activities, whatever type of self-care works for you to enjoy the impact of having that self-care. A self-care activity for me, having gone through so much trauma, would have been to be able to seek counseling and talk to a psychologist or a psychiatrist to be able to walk through what I've gone through and be able to name those things and walk through that pain. So self-care is different for everyone. Now, the relationship between crisis and self-care is that I've said here that it is intentional, it is deliberate, and it is an individual action. It's different for you. Now, self-care is some people say it's not really important, but I am advocating that it is not frivolous. It's actually a radical act of love. To love yourself, to be able to love your neighbor, you need to be able to love yourself. If you don't love yourself, if you don't take care of yourself, then you cannot take care of your neighbor. You cannot provide that support that the person needs. If you are not well, I can't, if I'm ever asked to, provide that support, if someone has gone through having gunshots and all that, I would not be the right person to provide that support because I am still suffering the post-traumatic stress disorder from that. So I understand that I have to be able to take care of myself before I can provide that support to someone in that situation. So it's not a luxury. It's actually a necessity. And when you want to start a self-care, you actually have to start with small steps. For people who are not used to taking care of themselves, it's important you start with small steps because some people feel guilty. Why am I doing this when this person is suffering this? I shouldn't be taking care of myself when this should be happening. There are so many excuses if we want to go down the rabbit hole. We call it here the rabbit hole. If you want to go down that pathway, you will have so many genuine excuses and reasons for you not to take care of yourself. So it's important that with self-care, if you are that person, you start with small steps. You determine what a small step is to you. If you're someone who is used to taking care of yourself, that's great, that's fantastic, kudos to you. I encourage you to continue to do that. So, and one way for us, I have a note here that to be able to manage the ups and downs of life, the constant things that are going on, the constant changes that we are facing. After COVID-19 goes, we would have other crises that will come our way because unfortunately, crisis is never ending. There is always another crisis to manage. There's another crisis around the corner. And so self-care is important to prepare us to be able to manage the next crisis that we will face. And helping us also helps us to refresh, re-energize, feel rested to deal with every challenge that we face in life. Some more benefits of self-care. I've talked about it being, it's helpful for us spiritually. It's helpful for us mentally. It helps us build resilience and coping skills. It's in addition to keeping us healthy, it improves our overall well-being as individuals. Helps us be more optimistic in life, allows us to be able to manage the academic pressures that we face, allows us to be able to manage the tricky interpersonal relationships that we face, and it helps us manage the uncertain future that is ahead of us because we do not know what the next crisis will be. So having that, I call it your bank of self-care filled up, provides that resilience you need, provides you with the coping skills and prepares you to handle the next crisis that comes your way. So it's important that we fill up that bank of self-care. And self-care, like I said, is multifaceted. It may be for you that it's taking care of yourself spiritually. Whatever spiritual care means to you, you focus on that. Or it could be taking care of yourself physically, eating good balanced meals, having physical exercises, whatever it is for you. It could just be being able to be as simply as organizing your schedule and planning for your day. That may just be what works for you. So there are so many benefits of self-care. I love this cartoon here that says, today I will live in the moment. Unless the moment is unpleasant, in which case I will just eat a cookie. I mean, that's self-care. So it paves the way for kind, compassionate engagement with the world around you and effectively provides the support that you need to give to others. It also prevents burnout. It prevents burnout for you, just taking that time out to do something that is personal for you. Now, but for someone who says it takes too much time, imagine that this is you without self-care. You are worn out, you get easily irritated, you cannot provide support the next person needs, you are overwhelmed. So self-care is important. It doesn't take too much time. Now, switching gears. I will pause here for a bit. Do we have any questions, comments?
Not in the chat.
Okay. So I will continue. I've talked a lot about self-care. I've talked a lot about crisis response and self-care. And I've talked about the fact that it is individualized. It's intentional. It's your personal choice. And so how then? What next? How? That's always the question I ask when someone comes up with a plan. I say, so how? So we'll take a look at the how. One of the first things we will have to do if we want to take care of ourselves is creating a plan, having an outcome, and tailoring that plan to our own needs, tailoring that plan to what works for us as individuals. And the first step in tailoring a self-care plan is, okay, my screen seems to have been frozen. All right. So the first step is determine your stress level. Some people have high thresholds for stress. Others have low thresholds for stress. What is your stress level? What can you manage? What can you not manage? So I have this adapted from, I adapted. And here, there are 3 different categories: the physical effects of stress, the psychological and emotional effects of stress, and finally, the behavioral effects of stress. Which of these categories do you fall into? Now, what's your stress level? Do you have increased frequency of fatigue when I'm looking at physical effects, headache, sleeplessness, problems, muscle, whatever it is? Or when we look at the psychological and emotional effects, we're talking about the feelings. Do you feel uneasy, depressed, nervous, overworked, underappreciated, overwhelmed? Or the behavioral effects of stress. Are you showing signs of procrastination, impatience, short temper, low productivity, complaining frequently? So determine your stress level. And in determining your stress level, these 3 key buckets are ways that would be helpful for you to be able to determine. These are all the outward effects of stress. The second thing will be identify your stressors. What are those things that are actually stressing you? And in identifying your stressors, we look at specific stressors. COVID-19 has been a major stressor, at least on this side of the world where we live. Zoom fatigue is another stressor for us. Having 6-hour meetings on Zoom, and I've had that. At the end of the day, I am so tired and overwhelmed. Teaching on Zoom has been overwhelming. My students have talked about the fact that they are tired because some have had 2-3 classes on Zoom. When I taught in January, I had a 3-hour class. And after my 3-hour class, I was just done for the day. My students had 6-hour classes on Zoom. So Zoom fatigue has been a major issue. Here, we've had so many people have lost their jobs. My older son was one of those people that lost his job during COVID. So here is identify your stressors. As an individual, what are your particular stressors? So think about this. We'll have an activity shortly. So think about this. What are some specific stressors? If you can write it down, feel free to write it down. You do not have to put it in the chat, but you can write it down on your own. Or if you are okay to put it in the chat, feel free to also put it in the chat. What are some specific stressors for you as an individual? I'll give you 30 seconds to think about that. And so feel free, you do not have to put it in the chat, but if you want to, go ahead. I will pause here for a bit. Yeah, see someone, Kendall said university. Vero said COVID-19. Lena said uncertainty. Irina said a lot of homework. Lord said too much university work. Charlene said fears about the future. Jennifer says lack of time. Christina says not social interaction. Rodrigo says money issues. Oh, that is a major stressor, money issues. Magdalena says lack of patience. Yes. And so keep on adding things in the chat. I would go to the next slide. And step 3 looks at identifying how you typically cope with stress. How do you, on an everyday, basis, cope with stress that comes your way? So I have that in 2 categories. So healthy strategies, which would be your self-care, and unhealthy strategies. So healthy strategies would be being physically active, eating healthy food, relaxation, following faith, spiritual beliefs. Unhealthy strategies would be living a sedentary life, which would be me here during the winter, that because it's minus 30, minus 35 degrees, it's difficult to go out in the cold. So that has been my life until summer came. Overeating, trying to do everything, because you've lost that sense of control. You're trying to get back control, and then you end up trying to do so many things, isolating, over drinking. I've mentioned that. So I will pause here a bit and have you think about, and you do not have to put this in the chat, except you want to. So think about your life and ways that you typically cope with stress. Do you have unhealthy strategies, or do you have healthy strategies? I have been able to identify, at least from this list, I have 2 unhealthy strategies that I use in coping. One is eating late. It's an unhealthy strategy for me, but I tend to do that because I have been staying awake longer into the night till 1 a.m. because I can't sleep. And that's as a result of the stress, which is affecting my sleeping pattern. And when I sleep late, I tend to eat late. And by morning, I'm waking up with a tummy ache because my body is rejecting eating late. So what are some of your strategies? So you can put that down as you think of that. And I'm going to the next slide. My screen freezes, so I like to give it a moment. Now here, I'm going to pause here and have you think about creating your own personal self-care plan. I would move to the next slide briefly because I want to show you a sample of what I've done. So here, think about creating your personal self-care plan in response to whatever crisis you are going through. And you have, what are your current major stressors? What are your current self-care strategies? And what additional self-care strategies do you think you might want to employ? Think on these things. We'll come back to this slide. I want to show you an example of my self-care plan. I have 5 major stressors in my life. My number 1 stressor is isolation from my friends and family. That is my number 1 stressor. It's been hard, not being able to connect because we've been observing protocols of do not connect with people, stay isolated because of the virus. We have the newer version of the virus now because it keeps mutating. So my number 1 stressor has been being isolated from my family and my friends. So what I decided to do, and I still do that till today, is that I connect with my friends for dinners and for conversations, and we do that over Zoom. That's the next best thing that we can do. And then every day I write 3 things I'm thankful for. And this was to help my sense of helping me create that positivity around me, because I discovered that I was beginning to feel very depressed. So 3 things every day at the end of my day, I say, I'm thankful for the fact that my day went well. I'm thankful that I'm alive. My kids are alive. We've not had COVID. I'm thankful for the fact that I can still talk to my parents. They are on the other side of the world, but I talk to my parents every week. My additional self-care strategy is to be able to travel to British Columbia to go see my sons for the summer. And with restrictions lifting now, and I keep telling myself I have to buy my ticket next week to be able to travel to go see my kids, because I haven't seen my kids since last year because of COVID. My number 2 stressor has been personal health issues. What do? I go for a walk and a run, especially now that it's beautiful. I talked about Zoom fatigue. So I turn off my video function to reduce visual overload, so I really can understand what you are all doing now. I drink water. I always have my water bottle. And I try to spread out my Zoom meetings as much as possible. So I want you to think about, for you, what are your current major stressors? What are some current self-care strategies? And what are some additional self-care strategies? So I'm going to go back to that slide, and I'll pause here for at least a minute or 2 for us to have this activity. Feel free to, if you've written anything down and you want to share, feel free to type it into the chat function. Or if you're comfortable with just unmuting and saying something, feel free to do that. So I'm going to pause here for the next 1 or 2 minutes. Yes, Christina.
Yeah, I wanted to share like mine. Well, I will say that my current major stressors will be university in general. I really like university, I really do. But right now with virtual classes, it's not like my best friend, let's say.
Yeah.
And also mental health issues. And then my current strategies will be like physical activities. I don't know, walk my dogs, ride my bike, and also to seek to professional help, like a psychologist. And I will say that additional self-care strategies, it will be my hobbies. Like I really like to sing. I really like to see TV shows with my mom and my sisters. And also like at the end of the day, I really like to take like a bath and pamper myself, and I don't know, like resting for all day. And then I will be like go to bed. But yeah, that will be my self-care plan, let's say.
Thank you, Christina, for sharing that. And I so agree with you. I like the idea of that bath after the whole day. That's a fantastic form of self-care. So thank you for sharing. We can take one more person if you want to share, or just type it to the chat function. And while we are waiting, I just like to do my nails. It's a form of relaxation for me, just being able to go to the nail salon and have someone do my nails. And it has been something I've missed that I have not been able to do because of COVID. So I do my nails at home, but it's a form of relaxation and self-care for me. So I want you to
try. Sorry.
Go on.
Okay, well, I'm going to say only one, Zoom fatigue. And well, that stresses me a lot. And well, the current strategies that I implement, let's say, is like to, when I finish my classes, I rest, I eat something. And then as additional self-care, I do some activities that have nothing to do with technological devices, like to go out to, like to be relaxed, but not with any technological device.
Thank you, Valerie. That's fantastic. And I do that. Over the weekend, at least 2 weekends, I switch off. I do not look at my computer. I do not look at emails. I do not grade any students' work. I do not do anything that has to do with the computer. And that is so helpful. Thank you for sharing. And so I want you to, the reason why I shared this was for us to really think through about what is really stressing us, what we are doing to, alleviate that stress. Because I find that sometimes we don't think through, we do not realize that we are actually, having some form of self-care strategy, or that we're actually not taking care of ourselves. So this helps us to be very intentional about taking care of ourselves and understanding how important it is. So I have from Kendall here, current major stressor is university and isolation from family or friends. So that's really hard. And current self-care strategy is to exercise. Additional strategy is to talk to others about how, about your feelings. So that is great. I'm so glad that you're able to talk to others and be able to connect to people, because that is so important. There's a saying in my place that when you talk to someone, your problem is half solved. So it is so important. So thank you everyone for sharing. And finally, to wrap it up, as usual, my screen is frozen, but give it a second and it will get back. So some suggestions of things we can do to practice self-care is, the list is there. Feel free to read through it. You can journal, you can take a nap. We've talked about that. Praise yourself when you do something awesome. Sometimes we do not do that. So we need to praise ourselves, for even trying. Make a date with yourself, spoil yourself a little. And Christina had talked about taking a long bath or shower. And final words is relax. Take it one day at a time. There will always be crisis, but how you respond to that crisis and how you take care of yourself while you're responding to that crisis is important. Remember that the world is not perfect. So if you didn't get it right the first time, does not mean that that's the end of the world. So remember, it's not perfect and you won't be able to do everything perfectly. So give yourself the opportunity and the room and the permission to make mistakes and to learn. Give yourself that permission. Give yourself that permission that, okay, it didn't work today, does not mean that I will not be able to do it right tomorrow. And finally, remember that you are ultimately in charge. The crisis is not what's in charge. You are ultimately in charge. And remember that crises are opportunities to better understand yourself, how you respond, and things that work for you. And that is it from me. So thank you so much for the opportunity to be able to share with you all today. And questions, if you have any questions. And I will stop sharing my screen. So I've opened it up for questions or comments, or what was something that really resonated with you that you would like to share, if there's anything.
In my case, I want to say that thank you very much. It was really interesting. And we sometimes, because we are doing or we're under a lot of stress, we forget to take care about ourselves. So thank you for reminding us that.
Thanks, Arlene.
I would like to thank you as well. It's been an amazing time and I have learned a lot. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Marcel. I'm pretty sure I'm not pronouncing your name right, but thank you. And I see lots of comments.
Yes, Maciel.
Maciel. Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you, Maciel.
Glory,
Yeah.
Kendall is asking if you're sharing the PowerPoint document. I don't know.
Okay. I would send it to you, Lina.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's it. Thank you all for being here and for listening. And I hope you can take this as a reminder, as someone has said, and practice it for yourself.
Yeah, I want to thank you because I think the plan is something that we can actually do. It's simple and it helps us reflect on what we're doing and what we're not doing. I really like to emphasize what you said because I'm really bad at doing exercise. But so sometimes when I don't do exercise one day, I tend to blame myself and be really, to punish myself, right? Like to be really mean to me. But then that idea that you said, like one day at a time, so the fact that I didn't do exercise today doesn't mean that I don't have the opportunity to do it tomorrow.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, and I agree because that happens to me. That's why I said we have to be able to give ourselves that permission.
Yeah, thank you. I'm gonna be sharing with you the link attendance form link. So please give me a sec, everyone. And it is in the chat box now. So please remember to complete it. So thanks again, Glory, for this topic, for the plan. As I said, I think that it's something that we can actually implement like today, right now. And I'm sure that we are just thinking about those strategies, the current ones and the ones that we should be doing.
Yeah. So thank you, Lina. Thank you, everyone. And I will take my leave.
Yeah, bye-bye. See you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
I'm going to stay here for a while in case you need to complete the form. And thank you all for participating. I really appreciate your participation here.
You're welcome.
Okay, Prof, thank you. Have a nice weekend.
I'll try. I cannot promise anything this weekend.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for that presentation. It was really enjoyable and I think important for everyone.
I hope that you just can remember and practice something she mentioned.
I don't know if there's a way that we can have the presentation like
As soon as she shares it with me, I'll share it with you.
okay, wonderful. Okay, thank you, Prof. Bye-bye. Stay safe.
Bye-bye. Bye. I'll try.